Hello and welcome to another episode of Sully Sports Hub. We're back with another draft breakdown. It's been a little bit. We had some vacation, some studying to do, but we're back to talk about what most people consider to be the number 2 prospect in this draft class, which is Shedeur Sanders. Probably the most well-known prospect in this class, even ahead of Cam Ward. Not necessarily for the skill set, but obviously he has a famous dad, played for him at Colorado. So that's going to be an interesting part of this conversation, especially I think as we talk about where a potential landing spot is. But to do that with me today, I've got my good friend John Hancock here to break down Shedeur. So John, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me again. And excited to talk about who Dion proclaimed would have been the number 1 pick in this draft. He said that a couple years ago. Shedeur.
Yeah, if Cam Ward did not exist, maybe he would be right, but
maybe
we do not live in that world. Shedeur, even about 2 months ago, the odds makers had this as a pretty even race, like between him and Cam Ward to be the number 1 pick. I think throughout most of the year, it was kind of talked about as these were the 2 best quarterbacks in college football. They both had kind of different skill sets. They're pretty similar. I think once draft season came around and it became more of a NFL evaluation versus a college evaluation, that's when you saw, okay, Cam Ward is going to start to assert himself as the clear guy in this class. And that's where I am. I think that's where you are as well. But Sanders is still an interesting prospect and has tools that make him potentially viable as an NFL guy. So let's just dive into Sanders here and kind of give a general outline for who he is as a player, and then we'll get into some more specifics in his game. So John, I'll throw it over to you first. What are like the few things that you would highlight that you think summarize Sanders as a player?
So I think that probably one of the number 1 things, he takes care of the ball, and that it was a completely different type of player from Cam Ward. Cam Ward, we talked about, makes all the crazy plays. He sometimes is a little bit scary when he does it. I don't really think you see that as much as with Shedeur. He takes care of the ball. He's not really forcing things too often. He works a lot underneath. I think that he handles pressure pretty well. He got pressured a lot at Colorado. Well, and I will say that caveat. Pressure doesn't prevent him from getting the ball out. We'll talk about some more stuff with pressure in the pocket later, and sometimes maybe what he does. But and I think the other thing with him is he's accurate in the sense that he gets the ball to receivers and puts them in position to make catches, which they often did. And I know that throwing to Travis Hunter definitely helped him.
Yeah. That's
during his career.
That's pretty nice if you're going to be a ball placement accuracy guy to have. I think he's the best 6-foot ball winner I've ever seen in college. Like for somebody who's not a physically imposing guy, like speed and quick twitch athleticism is more his strength. He wins every ball at the catch point. It's ridiculous. I know we're not talking about Hunter today. I kind of wish we were, to be honest, but we're not talking about.
Notice him when you're watching him.
It has to be a part of the evaluation for sure. Yeah, he's especially. I think back to the Kenny Pickett draft, and it turns out that was just Jordan Addison's really good, and I think just baited everybody into thinking that that Kenny Pickett was a great player. I'm not as freaked out with Sanders maybe as some of Pickett's reliance on athleticism when he was not a plus athlete by NFL standards. But I do think the receivers matter. It's not just Hunter. Jimmy Horn was a really good player. Will Shepard, Vanderbilt transfer, was very talented. They had a couple other smaller guys that were very quick, could create a lot of yards after catch. I think LeJontay Wester's one of the smaller receivers that is also a very good player. And the biggest place to me that you see that matter is in the screen game. They ran so many screens. It's outrageous. I completely understand why they did it because offensive line has been and continues to be Colorado's biggest weak point, especially on offense. Yeah, they can't run the ball. that's the complete extension of their run game is all of the screens. But it does, like, you're waiting for those throws of, like, can I finally see you throw something more than 5-10 yards down the field? Like, that's what you're waiting for as you watch the tape. I will say, like, he does a pretty good job on those screens. He's got a quick release. It's very simple. Unlike Ward, I feel like Ward is the, like, sidearm pitcher in this year's draft. Sanders is the, like, straight over the top guy with, like, the 12-6 curve. Like, he really comes over the top as he throws, which it sometimes prevents him from being as flexible as you would like to see. But I do think as somebody that's going to probably win from the pocket at the next level, it does allow him to stand in the pocket and make throws, even if there's some bodies surrounding him.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of his athleticism at some point, I'm sure. But I think he is a prototypical quarterback. This is like, he would have been the classic, like, quarterback of the 90s or early thousands. Like, they would have been looking for Shedeur, somebody like him, especially in his over-the-top delivery. But
yeah,
I don't want to get too much into negatives because I keep almost veering there with him.
Yeah, we'll get there. I do agree with your point, though. I think 15 years ago, I think Sanders Ward is a big debate at the top of the draft. Like, the way that the quarterback position has changed has moved directly to how Cam Ward plays the game. And I'm not even sure Cam Ward exists 15 years ago. Like, I don't know that he gets to Miami 15 years ago with the style that he plays. And Sanders is the guy, which is really funny because I think Sanders has the media perception as, like, the very popular, the, like, social media guy, when in reality the way he wins, like, playing the game is very old school. It's not a new creative type of play. He's a very smart player. He's a very accurate thrower. He can throw with anticipation and timing, all those sorts of things that we think of as, like, typical old school quarterback traits, which I think makes him really interesting because typically these, like, superstar kind of brand guys are the guys that make outrageous plays but then have drawbacks to their, like, Jalen Milroe this year would be an example of that. A guy that, like, in college, at least for maybe not Alabama fans, was very fun to watch for most of the time that he was playing. But then you see, like, okay, there's clear drawbacks. That's not the type of player that Sanders is. And the funniest thing about that to me is he is Deion Sanders' son. Like, how is he slow? How is he not fast? Like, Shiloh Sanders, the same way, his other son that plays safety, is not a great athlete. He just tries to commit a targeting penalty once every game, and that's his way of staying on the field. Like, it's bizarre to me that Sanders is this type of player, because you would think if Deion Sanders' son was a quarterback, like, it would be Lamar Jackson. Like, that's the type of player that you would imagine.
It's really funny you say that, and, well, again, I'm trying not to get too much into some of the things I don't like about his game, but I think that he is not aware. He knows he's Deion's son. I don't think he's aware he's not as good of an athlete as you would expect him to be. And I think sometimes he thinks he is a Lamar Jackson in the pocket, and he's not really. Like, he's not going to juke people out, scramble around, and make something happen. He thinks that he can. But oftentimes when he's winning, when he's doing things well, it's just standard, like a West Coast, working underneath, very quick, getting the ball out, getting it out on time and accurately. Like, that's where his good game is.
We'll get into that, specifically what you talked about with sometimes overestimating his athleticism. I have one clip specifically I think demonstrates that well. That is definitely one of the weaknesses of his game that we'll have to dive into. So I think that's a good overview. We hit on a lot of different things there that we can now, like, dive deeper into. I think overall this is a guy that does not win with athleticism. He has an okay arm, good accuracy, good timing. He's a smart player. Those are his strengths. He tries to create off script. He's effective at the college level. The question is, how effective is he going to be at the NFL level? So let's start with the processing, because I think that's probably, like, the best trait, or when you add that in with some of the, like, more finesse pieces of his game, that is where he excels. I think my favorite thing about Sanders, and I actually really enjoyed watching him this year, just during the college football season. Like, he was one of my favorite guys to watch, and the main reason for that was because of how competitive and fearless he was in the pocket. I'm not sure if you watched I think it was the Kansas game where he attempts to make a throw as a guy is just bearing down on him, and the guy hits him so hard in his legs that his body completely flips like over itself. It looks like a cartoon how fast his legs go straight up in the air. And that is the most exaggerated version of those types of hits, but he will stand in there and make a throw and take a beating in the pocket. And I think I respect that so much, especially because of how terrible his offensive line was. He knew it was going to happen. He knew if he stayed in the pocket and tried to make those throws downfield, he was going to take a hit. He was going to get beat up. But that was the type of plays that Colorado needed him to make. They had to get the ball to their playmakers. They depended on him to do that. And I think he did a really good job of keeping his eyes downfield in those situations. You can see him still in the pocket, really trying to operate and make throws even as things around him are getting chaotic around in the pocket.
Yeah, and you mentioned something, and I kind of mentioned this briefly earlier. When he is pressured, which he often was at Colorado, that offensive line was such a disaster. He always had his eyes downfield, and that included when he was trying to scramble around and make things happen. Usually when the play got to that situation, he was looking downfield. He was looking to make a throw. He definitely is a competitor. I think he got that obviously from Dion. Dion's like one of the ultimate competitors. They just want to win. They play really hard. Whatever else you want to say about him aside, you probably could have said some similar things about Dion as far as like attitude, but they are going to work really hard and are going to play really hard. And I think that does show up with the way that he handles pressure in the pocket.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of the perception and like off the field kind of mentality. I do think that is something we should unpack later on, because I think that directly impacts where he could potentially get drafted. So I think it's relevant. Like, I don't think it's just this is kind of a thing, but it doesn't really have an impact. So I do want to get back to that. But especially, I like what you said about he's a prepared player. You can tell, like, he understands what they're trying to do offensively. And I do think that, we talked about how much of a difference their receivers make, especially Hunter, as like legitimate big time players downfield. Shepard's another guy who's 6'4", 6'5", can make a lot of contested catches. You saw them go to him in the red zone a lot. Mm-hmm. He is an aggressive thrower though. Like he is not dependent on those guys being wide open in order to generate offense. He will see a covered receiver or a receiver that just has a little bit of leverage, and he will still make the throw. And that to me is one of the strongest points for him. If he can continue to do that at the next level, if he can continue to diagnose defenses and make throws into tight windows, especially if he ends up on a team that has skilled receivers, I think that is his best case and will allow him to succeed at the next level. John, do I have you back? I know we lost you there for a second.
I cut out for a second there. I think I followed most of what you were saying though.
Okay.
He knew that his receivers were really talented, and he definitely wanted to give them opportunities to win one-on-ones. He did that pretty frequently. I do think that one of the things that he didn't do was say, there's double coverage down there, but I still believe in my guys. I don't think that he really forced the ball like Cam Ward did at times, going between the two players. I think Shedeur was more, it's one-on-one. I'm going to go trust Travis Hunter to go make a play. So I did really appreciate that. He was smart with when he took an opportunity, when he tried to take the risk, he took care of the ball outside of that. And I do appreciate that. That is a really good skill that quarterbacks can have. Yeah,
I agree. Most of the risks you see him take, it's very understandable. It's okay. My guy is better than the defender that's out there. I'm going to take a shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's worth the risk. I agree. I think overall his risk, like weighing and balancing as a thrower is very good. I think where we get to the scrambling, that's where I have some concerns. That is where you see some outrageous risks for the level of athleticism that he has. So we'll have to break that down more. But I agree from a decision making and throwing perspective, I think he is a very, very solid player from that point. Anything else you would add on like the processing, mental makeup side?
I this not as a strength. I think that you covered most of it. I do think that at times his processing can be a touch slow, where it's like he sees something, he knows it's going to be there, but he's waiting to confirm, and he's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's there. And then by the time he throws it, because his arm is also not great, it's getting there late, it behind the receiver. And I think that that's where he needs to speed up his game a little bit, and because usually he is right about those things. He is smart. He knows what's going on. But if he speeds up his processing just a little bit, I think that he could kind of harness the strengths of his game even more.
Yep. Yeah. Outside of the athleticism related decision making pieces that we'll get into later, that is the one note I had as well. I thought there were times where you just wish that he was making the throw one beat earlier, especially for a guy whose arm strength is not great. That I don't like that combination. Like the guys that can afford to do that, or Josh Allen, some of those guys, they can afford to see a receiver come open and they'll just make the throw. Sanders is not that type of player. And I do think that there are times where he ends up being late, whether that's just I think some of that you could justify by saying his receivers are so talented. He just is confident that, once he sees them open, they're going to have plenty of time. But I agree. I definitely think that in the NFL, that's something that we'll have to improve.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the throwing. I think this piece, I probably won't have a ton to say about that we haven't already covered, because it's just like we talked about with Cam Ward. There's all these different little bits and pieces of his throwing style that make him extremely unique, and I think Sanders is basically the opposite of that. Like, this is just a prototypical, stands in the pocket, over the top release. It's simple. He's pretty comfortable throwing without a strong base, which I do think is one of his stronger abilities, is when things are a little bit muddy in the pocket, he can get a throw off even if his feet are not perfect. Sometimes the accuracy suffers. Sometimes I think the biggest thing you see is the arm strength really suffers when that happens. But he's able to get those types of throws off, at least. And to me, the biggest thing I like about his throwing, and why I don't think it's a straight up weakness for him, is he can layer throws. He can throw well to receivers that are blanketed in coverage. And he really understands leverage, especially for a guy that, like, when you're throwing to a guy like Travis Hunter, if you make a good throw that is against the leverage of the defense, he's open on every play because he's such a good player at the point, at the catch point, and then after the catch creating space. And you could see, like, they paired very well in that, because Shedeur is a very good thrower in terms of finding that open window, even with coverage blanketed around a receiver.
Yeah, I completely agree. You touched on a few things there that I wanna comment on. He does layer the ball really well. And I think that allows him to be, even though his arm strength is not that great, it allows him to be pretty successful in the middle of the field, which you don't always get with quarterbacks who are not rifling the ball in there. But it's usually, he can hit seam routes over linebackers because he knows how to layer the ball. You also see, like you talked about with understanding leverage, there were a lot of times where you would expect him to look and say, oh, he's not open, turn it down, because of, we talked about earlier, he's not taking unnecessary risks, but it understands that if the defender turned around to run with Travis Hunter, I can throw it to the opposite side of him, and Travis Hunter can adjust to that. And I think that plenty. He also showed some layering on those throws downfield. Can't remember exactly. There was a corner route that he it was a really nice corner route that he dropped in the bucket. He does that very well at times. I wish he was consistent, but I think that some of that is his limitations, his arm strength. I think that he does really understand. And it goes back to his risks are calculated. So he makes the throws. When they work out, they're really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think overall, I would say that he is like overall in the throwing, he's a C, B minus kind of guy when you're thinking at it from a big picture view. But this is where you get into like, I think he is a guy where he fits certain offenses, right? There are certain schemes where if you can maximize those things that he excels at, then you can turn him into maybe a B plus type of quarterback overall. We'll get into that a little bit more on maybe some landing spots at the end, because I do think that's a very interesting discussion with him, because I think he's probably got the widest variance of where he could end up of almost anybody. Like, I could see him going second overall. I could see him not being drafted in the first round at this point. So it's going to be a very interesting, time period for him as we get closer to the draft. Okay, let's now get into the athleticism piece. I'll start with a couple like quick positives, but overall this is going to be a concern for him. I think he is a solid straight line runner. They really only use him as a design runner in the red zone, which I think part of that is just they didn't want him to take unnecessary hits earlier in the drive.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they had to protect him. And he is a guy that on a keeper, he'll get you 3 or 4 yards. He'll fall forward. He'll fight through contact. He can make one guy miss, with a little juke move, but he's not going to get much after that. He's not a quick enough and agile enough player to be a super effective runner. But I do think he at least deserves a little bit of credit for, like, this is not something that's completely, away from him. It's not a statue type of guy in the pocket, but it's not a skill for him. It's just something he can contribute with a little bit. The limitations for him, it's just overall I think this actually shows up more as a thrower than it hurts him as a runner, where the sacks are just so bad. I mean, it's terrible. He takes so many. He tries to play like he's Cam Ward, and he doesn't have the athleticism. He doesn't have the arm strength. And there's a lot of times where you see throws on the run where you just think, oh man, like if he just was able to create a little more separation from the defensive lineman, he would have been able to get that throw off. Or he would have been able to put enough on the throw to actually get it to the receiver instead of it skipping 10 yards short of the guy. There's plays where you hope that he is getting out of a sack with, he makes an active decision not to throw the ball away to try to avoid pressure, and then it results in a sack. There's a lot of plays like that. This is my biggest concern with him is you will see with guys like Kirk Cousins, guys like Geno Smith, which, by the way, this is the bucket of quarterback I think we're talking about here, where when pressure gets in their face, they throw the ball away so fast, it goes straight to like Kirk Cousins gets mocked for just like, throwing to the check down as soon as someone gets close to him. But there's a reason for that, because he is not going to avoid pressure and make some great play after the D-line's coming after him. Sanders really gets away with it enough in college where I think it's fine for Colorado, but I'm very concerned about that at the NFL level for him.
Yeah, I think everything you said is right on. And I think some of the most concerning plays to me, outside of the sacks, which they were just terrible. There was one that I think it was like a 25-yard sack.
Yeah, he loves just running back and forth and hoping that something happens.
I'm going to make this play, and then they catch up to him and sack him because he's really not a great athlete. I think the other thing that was really concerning watching him was when he gets out of the pocket and he's rolling, he can't even make the edge against guys that are inferior athletes in smaller conferences. It really concerns me for the NFL because, I mean, these defensive ends, linebackers in the NFL, you're talking 4'5", 4'6" guys pretty regularly, and even the larger defensive linemen are going to be moving a lot quicker than he is when he's looking downfield throw. And I think that any aspect at any game in college is not really going to translate. I think he's going to have to learn how to. Um, we talked about this with Cam Ward. Cam Ward, one of his strengths was the small movements to find space to navigate the pocket. I think Shedeur has mobility that he could be that movement guy just to find space. You talk about he can fight through the mud in the pocket to still make a throw. He really can. If he could transition into those small micro moves, I think that he could be a much more successful player. Just understand he's Dion. He doesn't have that level of athleticism. And a lot of times he really needs to be quicker to check down than he was.
Yep. Yeah, we'll see an example of that on one of the clips I want to talk through. And I do think my favorite thing he does is that the defensive lineman has the edge on him, and he fakes that move back inside and then spins back to the outside. He does that like every time he's trying to scramble, and it actually works pretty well for the most part. Like he gets a lot of people with it on one of the clips that I will talk through. We'll see that, but it is funny. Like he does have he's got some like ideas of how he wants to scramble. It just does not always end up how he's hoping that it will. You talked there a little bit about some of the movement in the pocket. That's another thing that I don't love about his game right now. He drifts a lot. I think part of that is just because of the offensive line he was playing behind. But I see times where that affects his accuracy, where he's standing like completely flat-footed, facing forward, and then just kind of like shuffling around in the pocket, trying to, drift away from the defense. And it directly impacts the accuracy or the ball placement on a throw. And that is a concern for me because, like we said, at least the way I see Sanders, this is a guy that he has to be, for him to be an above average NFL starting quarterback, he has to be elite from the pocket. And so any of these small weaknesses in his game surrounding that type of play style, they scare me because this is the part of the game that he is going to have to really excel at the next level.
Yeah, and he doesn't have that elite athleticism to fall back on. And it's not going to buy you time with him either. He's not the Josh Allen where, if it's not perfect at first, you can see him just dominating with sheer athleticism early on, where it buys you time to fix the mechanical issues, to fix some of the other problems in his game. Shedeur is either he's going to work as a pocket quarterback or he's not going to last in the NFL.
Yep. Yeah. And there will be times where he makes a play out of structure. Like it's there. It's just, I can't project that as a plus skill. So when I'm trying to look at like how he works, it's got to be on those traditional quote unquote quarterback skills. That has to be the path forward for him. Okay, I think that's a pretty good overview. I think anything else that you want to highlight before we get into some of the clips and comps, etc.?
Yeah, there's one more thing, and we probably should have talked about this with just his throwing ability. As much as he is an accurate quarterback, and people talk about like that's where he wins, I didn't always think his placement was good. There were a lot of times where you'd have a dig coming across the middle, and the receiver has to stop completely just to backward the ball. You'd also see on breaking routes where he can't get the ball there or the ball is out of bounds.
Yeah,
there were a lot of times, and I think you talked about there may be some mechanical inconsistencies that cause this, but he skipped ball in front of guys a lot. I think that also has something to do with his below average arm or average arm probably at best, and that also scares me for being a guy that he's billed as like he's this uber accurate placement guy. I didn't always like that part about his game, and I thought that when it's there, it's good, but I don't think it's there as much as it is with some other quarterbacks in this class. So I kind of look at that and I say, like, what are you really drafting him for at that point?
Yeah, to me, the way I try to parse that out, because it's like it's funny. It sounds like an obvious thing to say, like, when it's good, it's good. But to me, like, to dig into that, what allows him to have good ball placement? To me, it's when his athletic limitations are not a factor. So when he's not throwing the ball deep down the field, and then when his mechanics are right, I think he has pretty good ball placement. I think that's a plus for him generally, but there are a lot of underthrows on deep balls, and it doesn't matter because his receivers are open by 10 yards, so it doesn't matter. But that will in the NFL, and then the mechanics, we'll see it on a clip here in a second. That is the other time where I really see like it suffer. I think when things are right, like overall, if you said like, will this guy be good at this in the NFL? My answer would be yes, but it's just there's times where it fades, and you just wish that it was a more consistent thing. But that gets back to some of the general concerns that we have with him as a prospect.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's get into the clips. John, I will have you confirm here in just a second that you can see what I am showing as well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to run through 4. There's some good here. There's some bad. First here, this is an example of a play where I think we see Sanders make poor decisions that result in a sack, where there is a completely viable outcome for this play that results in a positive gain. So Sanders here is actually going to get a pretty clean pocket. So overall here, no immediate pressure, reading the play out, steps up into the pocket, still has space here. Overall, maybe you could say he should make this throw. He probably should just make this throw, the hitch over the middle of the field. But he doesn't like it. He gets off of it here. Steps up. Okay, now, edge has contained on the right side. Not much here, but hey, we actually have an answer here. This hitch route has pulled both linebackers down. We've got a little check down available. The corner up here is worried about Hunter. This can maybe pick us up a first down. If not, it's going to be a positive gain. What does Sanders do? I can make that play. I'm going to go create. I'm going to go try to make 2 guys miss. And then that's where you see him really struggle. And these are the types of plays where, to me in the NFL, like especially here, he makes the first guy miss. Even at this point, okay, he's made the first guy miss. Good job. Like you at least made a play here. This ball has to come out now. Because we talked about it, these guys are not much slower than him. So if he has to pick up steam and make a play, I mean, you see here, he stumbles, the D lineman's able to track him down and make a sack. There's multiple chances for him to just get the ball out quickly. And you can't just assume that because a lineman has gone up the field that he's completely out of the play, right? You've got to be aware of your surroundings. So this overall, it's just one play. It's not the end of the world, obviously, but this to me is indicative of some of the broader concerns that I have with the way that he plays.
Yeah, and going back to some good things about his game, he doesn't immediately panic that there's a defensive end in his face and throw into double coverage, but then he falls back onto the I can be Lamar Jackson and make both these guys miss, and he doesn't get the ball out to the open check down, which I think that if he just does that, he can make this play in the NFL too if he gets the ball out when he should. But.
Yeah. This is not like a Will Levis to me, where it's like I'm not sure it's in his brain to ever do this. Like I think he can get there, but it is.
He has it.
I think part of it is the way they had to play at Colorado, but it's a legit concern for me because it does pop up a good bit. Like I don't think this is something that just that can be waved away as a concern. So this next clip is one of the more positive plays Sanders has. They're going to kind of design a little bit of a rollout for him here. He doesn't like what he sees initially. Here's the patented spin move where he fakes inside and then gets back out. And now he recognizes, okay, he's not super open, but it's Travis Hunter. So I'm going to try to make this throw. On the run, squares his shoulders up, makes the throw. You see not great arm strength, not great velocity, but overall I think this is a positive play for Sanders. And these are the types of plays that he makes where you see a lot of his best traits. You see that he's a very confident player. He's kind of a creative runner here. Like you see, okay, this guy looks like he's got the edge. I'm going to fake inside, get back out. That's a great move. then is able to square his shoulders and make a pretty good throw. If you were going to critique anything on that play, it's probably just, you can see the ball is not coming in super hot. Like Hunter kind of has to come back and make a play on the ball. But overall, he layers the throw. He gets it over the defender that is trying to make a play there and leads Hunter towards the sideline. So I think that overall this is a good play for him. It does show a little bit of his limitations, but I think here you see like that type of throw that in that situation, putting Hunter on the boundary, like that's the type of plays you're looking for from Sanders.
Definitely. And, assuming that he's going to be, well, we'll talk about potential landing spots and who may draft him. Assuming he's going to be in a place with uber talented receiver, you could see plenty of these plays next year or two, where he's giving them a chance to make a play and they're talented enough to make it. I think that you see the limitation with the arm. A quarterback with a better arm, that's probably a touchdown if it's accurate, because Hunter's running free. The safety might catch him down the boundary, but that's probably an extra 20 or 30 yards. But I think it's a fine play, and he does have plenty of positive plays that are like this.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into the next one here. This one, we're not going to have to break this one down in too much detail. Watch his feet and then watch where the ball goes. It is like, this is just the quintessential, like, okay, I'm going to creep back. I'm never going to turn my shoulders at all. So now both feet are off the ground, not planning. Oh, well, now I got to make a throw. Well, of course, it's going to be a duck, and it's never going to have a shot to be completed because my hips are so wide open that I can't get back around and make this throw where it needs to be. This to me is a very important thing for Sanders to iron out, because like we said, for him to be a successful NFL quarterback, his plays in the pocket have to be close to perfect. This has to be a completely ironed out portion of his game that is consistent, reliable. And at this point, I think he's close to that. But there's still some times like this where you see, there's not pressure here. I mean, this is a perfect pocket. Step up, make the throw, set your feet. So this is something I hope that he continues to improve on, because I do think there are advantages to the way that he drops back sometimes, where because he stays more square, it allows him to see the entire field. But there are plays like this where you can directly see it impact the accuracy.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that he needs to be cleaner. I do think he got better at this throughout his college career. You go back and watch
definitely.
Jackson State. Yeah, you watch Jackson State, you watch his first year at Colorado, he was skipping a lot more balls than he did last year. So I think he got a lot better at. I think that you could see that and say, we project that he's going to continue to clean up his game and get better at this as he gets older, as he probably gets a little bit stronger, matures a little more physically. Like, you probably project that forward a little bit and say that this play, while it happened too much, it happened less last year, and we'll fix it, and it'll happen less going forward too.
Yep.
So
yeah, I agree.
I could see where people project that forward.
Yeah, if you go back and watch some of the Jackson State stuff, like it kind of just looks like a guy that's like standing around, making like he's more talented than everybody on the field, so it doesn't matter. But I agree, it is a big improvement from where he was before, and you can tell it's something he's made a big effort to work on. All right, this last one, this last clip kind of speaks to some of the mentality stuff I see with Sanders. That sometimes is a positive, but I think for somebody of his athleticism level can be a negative at times. So this is actually like a 3-play sequence where I'm showing the second play. I'll recap the first play. So the first play here, in this situation, they're already up 2 touchdowns here in the second quarter. It's like late second quarter at this point. They're getting close to the red zone here. First down was a failed tunnel screen. Just the play did not work whatsoever. So they're already in a little bit of trouble here. Then they run this sort of, handoff option, snap gets fumbled, whatever. They pick it up. Okay, sloppy play. So they're in a hole here. You can see on the scoreboard, it's 3rd and 16. They're up 2 scores. 4 minutes left in the second quarter. And this type of play, you're going to see Arizona. They're showing some guys at the line, but they drop 8, right? They're playing a very conservative type of coverage. They're keeping everything in front of them. They're just going to, concede maybe a few yards here, but of it, they're just trying to prevent a first down from happening. And Sanders here reads this out, and you can see, you probably just have to throw the little route here across the middle. There's not much downfield, tight windows. Well, he decides I'm going to fire this in and try to make a perfect throw. And what happens? I mean, the safety is able to drop to his knees to make sure that he catches the interception, which means it was a pretty easy play for him to drive down on that ball. These are the types of plays where I don't think it's as much that he just got fooled in the coverage. I think sometimes he gets too aggressive, and this speaks to his sack avoidance. Sometimes you see this in some of the decisions he makes, and overall, he is a very competitive player, and most of the time that's a good thing. Most of the time you see that come through in his toughness and his fire that he has as he plays the game. But these are the types of plays that you hope he can continue to iron out, because you can't have these types of plays in the NFL where you just tilt, where the last two plays have not gone well. I'm going to make something happen on this play. No, defenses are too good to get away with that, especially, here knowing time, score, situation, down and distance. Like, this is take the check down, kick the field goal. You're up 3 scores, get off the field. You go into half, you're in a good spot. So this play to me just shows the mentality, the maturity from a awareness and decision making standpoint is something that could still be improved upon.
Yeah, and I think that I think on this one, he probably was trusting him too much. I can make that throw. His arm is not good enough.
Yes, good point.
To make some of these tight window downfield throws. I think you did see it come up quite a bit in the red zone too, where he's trying to fit balls into tight windows in the red zone, and his arm just can't do it. And he needs to check it down and kick the field goal.
Yeah, and I think I also think that's one of the reasons why they probably ran him a lot in the red zone. Like, that you could tell that they felt like that needed to be a big part of their offense, which also just speaks to the fact they can't run the ball. So, it's really hard to throw the ball down in the red zone when things are tight, and when you can't just hand the ball off and get any sort of push, that's really the only option, is to just hope that Sanders can make a play. But yeah, I agree. Okay, so those are some clips. Just kind of speaks to some of his overall tendencies. Let's get into comps. I'll start this time. I feel like I always make you go first. So I'll do best case and worst case. I really don't love my best case comp. I struggled a little bit to come up with what I think a positive outcome is for him, just in terms of a guy that I feel like is a perfect fit. I like my worst case comp more, but I'll start with best case. So to me, if every single thing goes right for Shedeur Sanders, I have the best case as Geno Smith. I love Geno. I am way higher on Geno than most people. I think he's a great quarterback. I can't believe that the Raiders got him for only a 3rd round pick. I think that was a great move. But to me, the things that Sanders is good at, if he excels at those in the NFL, if he is a elite thrower from the pocket with great timing and accuracy, and is able to consistently deliver throws in tight windows in a lot of times not the best situations. Seattle has good wide receivers, but their offensive line has stunk the past couple years. You see that from Sanders at Colorado, where he navigates around that at times, which is one of the reasons it kind of reminds me of Geno. That to me is kind of the best case for him, because Geno is another guy who's not the best athlete. Sometimes he'll make plays, sometimes he'll scramble a little bit, but that's not where he wins. He wins from the pocket. He wins through his accuracy, his timing, his ball placement, all those sorts of things. The thing that I don't like about this comp the most is I think Geno's arm is better than Shedeur's, clearly. I think the zip Geno has on throws over the middle allows him to make some of those kind of Stafford-like throws where you have a tight window and you are firing the ball in there. That's the type of play I don't see on Sanders' tape as much, and I'm not sure he can really ever get to. But other than that, I think overall the skill set of Geno is that's the type of player you're hoping Shedeur Sanders can become.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I do agree that I think Geno has a better arm for sure. He's not super mobile, so I do think but he can make play every now and then, and I think that's probably where your comp is a little better than mine. Best case. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So my best comp, I have Andy Dalton. I think that you could pick several of this class of quarterback where it's they're good enough. They're fine. They don't have the best arm. They do take care of the ball. They can run an efficient offense at times if everything else around them is good. If you get them playmakers at receiver, they can distribute the ball to the playmakers. But overall, it's like they kind of keep you in that quarterback purgatory range where like they're not really good enough to elevate the offense. They're really good enough to win on their own. But they can win you games in the regular season. You know, you could win 10, 11 games with these guys if everything around is good. Maybe that speaks to like what I really see him as and what I see as like his high end outcomes. But you know, personally, I wouldn't want to gamble a whole lot. Gamble like the number 2 or number 3 pick on a guy that I think at best is going to be Andy Dalton. But I might be in the minority there. So
my worst case was late career Andy Dalton. So we are like we did not talk about this before. Yeah, we did not speak about that at all. But I was on the exact same page, and I think that's where, to me, like the reason I kind of went to like the worst case being late career is like that was when you saw like the traits for Dalton started to fade, and it was just like, okay, this guy can come in and he's not going to kill you. Like, he's a fine backup, but you're never going to get like more out of the offense than you were hoping for with Andy Dalton. He's never going to make those downfield throws that you wish he would. The athleticism is going to be enough where he makes a play every once in a while where you're like, oh yeah, you know, that was a nice play by Andy Dalton, but he's never going to create consistently for you. That, to me, like, I don't know that there's really that much to add in terms of his in terms of the similarities, because it's kind of that meh quarterback, right? Like that, if Sanders does not work out, that is who he is. He's a guy with average traits and an average skill set. So it shouldn't be surprising that there's kind of a broad group of guys you can pick from, but it's funny that we both ended up with Andy Dalton.
That is really funny because, well, I'll say early career Andy Dalton, which I guess was more the direction I was going. And the Bengals won plenty of regular season games.
Yes,
with Andy Dalton. They just couldn't do anything in the postseason. But for worst case, I had like Brian Hoyer, like the career backup type who every now and then will come in and he'll do a little bit. He's the thing that always around as a competent backup. You know, he's not going to flame out of the league in a couple of years because he's smart enough to do a little bit, but like he's not really going to do anything for you. Which I think Brian Hoyer and career Andy Dalton are basically the same players.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And this is okay. Now this gets into, I think, some of like the off the field stuff indirectly, because and I don't think this impacts where he gets drafted. I don't. But if Shedeur Sanders is late career Andy Dalton, do you want to sign him as your backup quarterback? Like, is that?
No, I had that in my minds too. Like, you want your backup quarterback to be the clipboard holder who can help out the starter. You know, he's basically your like assistant offensive coordinator, ideally. And I don't know that you want a guy with attitude concerns as your backup quarterback.
And that's okay. I feel like we need to unpack that some, because I think a lot of people say like, you know, oh, he has like off the field concerns or whatever. Like, what do we actually mean by those things? Because he does not seem like a bad guy. He does not seem like he has major character issues. To me, the biggest concern I would have about placing him in a backup role is just the media circus that comes around with that. The Coach Prime quotes that are going to be in the media about, you know, why is my son not starting? All of those sorts of things. And I do think that Sanders seems to, and maybe this is just because at Colorado they did own the place, but that does seem to be the attitude he carries himself with. Is like, I walk in, I'm super confident, I come in here like I own the place. I think you even saw, like, Todd McShay reported about that from some of the combine interviews where it was people just kind of talked about how they were kind of bizarre. Like, he just is, the way they described it was that he did not care what they thought of him, which is probably the only player that's ever gone into combine interviews not caring what the people thought of them, because those are the people that are going to be drafting you. But, you know, he may they may already kind of have a landing spot picked out for him. Things are a little different in the way that they're operating. But that is a question for me because, to be honest, I don't see Sanders as a guy that comes in as a successful starter early on. And then that gets into the question of, like, do you want this guy as your backup? Like, I think I only want Sanders as my backup if the guy in front of him is a sacrificial lamb bridge quarterback. Like, in that case, I'm fine with it. But I don't know that I want him backing up a guy that's just going to cause a bunch of noise. Like for example, let's get crazy here. If the Dolphins took him in the first round or the second round, or if the Niners took him in the second round, like that will create just so much chaos within your organization. So I am very curious to see how this unfolds come draft time.
Yeah, I think you're right as far as like the concerns with him. I don't think they're like, oh, he's going to be this crazy partier who... No, like that's not really the picture that you really see with Colorado. They worked hard. You know, Coach Prime, he's really flashy. I think that the rest of the Sanders family also carries a lot of that. You know, they're flashy. They want to put on the show. But even Deion Sanders, when he was playing, like, he worked hard. He was good at his craft. It's a guy
they love football. Like, they really care about football.
They love football, and they're not going to let the off-field stuff come between them and playing football. I think the concern is that he thinks he owns the place immediately. And I don't know that his talent is good enough for him to walk in the door and immediately be like, you're going to craft everything in this organization around me. I think that you also have the media circus with Coach Prime. Deion's going to make comments. He's going to be involved in whatever's going on and have suggestions for the coach and the GM about who they should sign to make sure they're better. They get off, like, that stuff is going to for whoever drafts him. So you really have to be committed, think that he is worth it. And maybe even be prepared for a year or two that Deion wants to come coach your team, because that's where his son, like, you might have to realistically say that could be in our future. And I think also when you're talking, like, if he doesn't work out at his first stop, for his second stop, he's not going to go to a place with an established quarterback, like you were talking about. You know, if he's taking a backup job, he's going to go somewhere where it's like, it's kind of uncertain. He has a realistic chance to win that job. And then probably you're going to have to give it to him. So I think long term, if he doesn't work out as a starter, he may not be a backup just because people are not going to want to put up with that constantly hanging over their head, hanging the clip or holding the clipboard.
Yeah, I think, to me, whether or not that ends up working out is entirely up to him. Like, if he figures it out and acts the way that the teams want him to act, I think the type of player he is, he would be a great backup quarterback. Like, he would be a great backup quarterback to have on your team. I do think generally people like him. Like, I don't think he is an unlikable person. So it's like, I definitely don't want to say that it would never work. It just, I think that the Sanders operation would have to go a little differently than how things currently go for that to work out well. Okay, let's go in. Let's give our, like, final kind of, like, grades, how we feel about him, and then we can conclude with just a little more, like, landing spot talk here at the end. So I'll start with where I'm at. I currently have an early third on him, which is probably a little lower than consensus. I think most people have him as, like, an early second guy that they could see you easily trading up to get the fifth-year option on in the late first round. I am still open to being swayed into him being a second rounder. I'm not set in stone on this yet. I think third is, like, the lowest that I would be on him come draft time. But to me, the biggest concerns I have are the play style meshed with the skill set. Like, how does that translate? And then, is he elite enough at the things that he will have to be elite at to succeed in the NFL? Like, I think I'm still having to make assumptions that he gets better at his strengths in order for a positive outcome to come from taking him in the first round. And that's where it starts to scare me. It's like I don't feel like I have confidence in any single part of his game, like making him the value of a first round pick. Could he, if he develops into a Kirk Cousins, who pick generic pocket, like if he's as good as Jimmy Garoppolo was when Garoppolo was in his prime, that might be worth a first round pick. Like it might be, but especially top 5, like I would not like that. That scares me to death. Like I think that's a terrible idea. If you're the Browns, like I know the Browns have been talked about a lot because the only way for them to get a quarterback is if they draft one, that at least a good quarterback, because Watson's contract is so outrageous. Like I don't care. Tank for 2 years and draft a quarterback. Like you should. One bad decision should not inform the next one. Using a top 5 pick on Sanders is not your escape route. It's your route into further trouble for your franchise. So I don't know. That I'm curious to hear your thoughts are on his grade, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree. I have just a mid third on, like he's a guy taking the third. I came away from watching him really underwhelmed, and I didn't really get it. Like, what is all the hype about? I think some of it has to do with the name. I originally a little bit lower on him, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, he does have some strengths. There's something to work with there. But I am really concerned about all the limitations, all the things you talked about. I don't think I would take him second round even. And to the Browns, well, we can mention, since we talked about Cam Ward, the Titans have pretty much shown their hand. I think taking Cam Ward first overall.
Yeah, if they haven't, it's the best smokescreen of all time. Like it's an all-time smokescreen.
Well, and then I don't know what they're doing at quarterback if they're not. I guess they're rolling with Levis again.
Yeah, yeah, it would just be trading down and keeping Levis.
They solidified the offensive line. They didn't do anything at quarterback, so presumably Ward's gone at 1. If the Browns take Sanders, I really don't get that. Not just because of the current debacle with Deshaun Watson, but also because I think realistically what you would get out of them at this point and their type of player is really similar. Deshaun Watson in his prime early on had a lot more athletic and arm ability than Sanders does. But right now, he's a shadow of his former self, and he would be pretty much what you'd be getting from Sanders, I think. So Sanders might be a little bit of an improvement on that. But I don't think that is an escape route, and I think that they need to just suck it up and tough it out for another year until they can get rid of the Watson contract. I think realistically, apparently the Giants love him. I wouldn't do that either at 3. I think that's incredibly irresponsible, but especially considering what they've done at quarterback already.
Yeah, dude. Okay, let's hit on those. Let's hit on Cleveland first, and then let's get to the Giants. But yeah, Cleveland to me, I would just rather sign Kirk Cousins for the minimum when the Falcons inevitably have to release him. I don't think you could play Watson again. Like I just don't. I would rather name a quarterback off the street. Like I don't care. I'm not playing Watson again. But Kurt, you're going to be able to get Kirk Cousins for $1 million when this game of chicken finally ends with the Falcons. And Sanders in 3 years will be better than Cousins. Like there's no debate about that with the way Cousins is trending. But I think next year Cousins is still going to play better than him. And this seems to still be a team that's kind of trying to win. Like I don't get the impression that they're ready to just buy. Like you cannot pay Myles Garrett $40 million a year and then at the same time be rebuilding. Like there's just no way. So I would just rather go sign Cousins or whoever, whatever veteran I guess you can find. And then, okay, now the Giants. Shedeur Sanders, Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson. Like, are you like,
that is an insane quarterback room.
No way. No. That they cannot do that. Like I honestly they probably could.
It would be amazing, but
but I just don't. To me, even if I don't get why you sign both of them if you actually like Shedeur Sanders. Like it doesn't. I don't think that makes sense at all. I think you sign Jameis if you like Shedeur, and then you just take Shedeur. Like, why are you spending $20 million? Go sign a guard or another receiver or whoever, like whatever, just something to help Sanders more than the $20 million devoted to another quarterback is. So I don't think they're going to take him. Like, why would you sign two quarterbacks and then still take Sanders?
It doesn't make sense to me. And especially, like, Russ has some of the same, like, weird attitude stuff. Not like bad guy, terrible off-field concerns, but just like, I don't know if you want to call it egotistical. I don't know if that's necessarily what it is, but like Russ still is like, I'm the guy.
But he's a weird guy. Yeah. And Winston will get along with anybody. I'm not really worried about.
He's amazing. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of committed to being the backup now, and I think that's good for him with his ability level. But yeah, I don't see Russ and Shedeur meshing at all.
Yeah, and signing Russ to me is an indication like we have to make playoffs or we're fired. And
yes.
So okay, well then why are you using all of those resources on two mid quarterbacks if
I think you kind of talked about it right there with job security. So if you sign Russ and Jameis and draft a quarterback, you have three options. So, if you play Russ and it's not going great, but you don't think Shedeur's ready, you throw Jameis in there and he feeds Malik Neighbors 25 targets a game. And then when that inevitably goes down the drain, then you say, hey, management, don't fire us yet. We drafted
you play him in week 16 and you hope that he looks good for 2 games.
He looks pretty good. You bought yourself another year. I think that if they take him at 3, that's the only reason they do it. But again, long term, I don't think that's good for you at all.
No, I think you're right. I don't want to say it's impossible, but I would be very surprised if they did at this point. Like I would have a really hard time understanding that, especially because both of these moves happened late in the process. Like these were not things that happened a while ago and then they get around to watching Sanders and fall in love. Like no, your evaluation should be relatively done at this point. But that's the last point I want to make here about where he ends up. Because like you said, I do think it's going to end up with Ward going 1 to Tennessee. We'll see. Maybe that changes. If he gets past 3, where does he go? I mean, New England's got a quarterback. Jacksonville has a quarterback. Vegas has a quarterback. The Jets have a quarterback, even though it's Justin Fields. But for purposes of discussion, like they at least have a starter for this season. Carolina, New Orleans, Chicago, San Francisco, Dallas, Miami, like all these teams are not necessarily quote unquote quarterback needy. I could see, if a Vegas or a New York Jets or a New Orleans Saints, if one of those teams falls in love with him, I could see it. But I don't see them as I guess the way I would put it is they're not quarterback desperate. And to me, to take Shedeur Sanders in the top 10, you have to be quarterback desperate. And I don't like if I have Derek Carr as my quarterback, why am I drafting another Derek Carr in the top 10? Why am I doing that? Why am I putting more resources into getting the same results out of the position? I don't get it. Somebody is going to like him more than we do. So I do think he'll go, but like I don't know. I genuinely think that there's still a chance he does not get drafted in the first round.
I think so too. I think that it obviously takes the Browns and Giants passing on him, being smart, which they're not always inclined to do. And then I think that it would take other teams not feeling the same way. Pretty much every other team feeling the same way about him that we do, even if that means he just falls to the second. I do think that he probably does go first, most likely. But I don't think it's as clear-cut as it was a couple months ago when he was in legitimate running for the number 1 pick. I do think that, oddly enough, I think the Saints could be an interesting fit. They're still kind of running some of the same stuff. I think that he would have some of the same strengths as a Breeze. Obviously not to the same level, close to the same level. But I think that they could see him. Oh, this is a guy that fits what we want to do. So I could see them convincing themselves that this is a potential option for us if he falls to them. But
3 years ago, the Steelers had the 20th pick and they took Kenny Pickett. So maybe they'll take another 3rd round quarterback at the 21st pick
Maybe
and
so.
start the whole train over again. We'll see. But yeah, I don't. There's not one team that stands out to me as like this is the perfect fit. But I can see enough teams talking themselves into it where he might end up going. You know, honestly,
I think
the one that I like the
they took Bo Nix
yeah,
last year. So.
the one that I sneaky like the most, and this would like people would go crazy if this happened. The Rams at 26. Like, if you put him with McVay and you know he's not starting because Stafford's obviously the guy, but Stafford is not far from retiring. Especially like if they waited, I don't know if I would want to do it at 26. Like they're still trying to contend, but in the second round, if he's there, like I would kind of like that for the Rams. Like this is the type of guy that would do very well in a McVay like system. So that would be one I would throw out. But yeah, I honestly you probably just have any quarterback go play with Sean McVay and it'll go pretty well.
Yeah, McVay can make probably anything work.
But in terms of timeline and all that, like I could see it.
You mentioned the Steelers, and I think it's a terrible idea, but I think that it'd be hilarious if they signed Aaron Rodgers and then drafted Shedeur Sanders. That would all just like an insane combination, similar to a Russ and Shedeur. But
yeah, that would be pretty funny. I would, as a Ravens fan, I celebrated when they drafted Kenny Pickett. I would be celebrating again. Just continue the mediocrity for as long as possible while these defenders are still in their primes. Okay, anything else you want to add on Shedeur?
No, I think that's it. I think we talked about him longer than I would have expected to.
All right, that'll wrap us up. Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. Overall, I think we both seem to be in a pretty similar spot. This is a guy that I think there's a real path to him becoming a viable starting quarterback. I think you can easily see how a team would talk themselves into him. Like there's a clear skill set this guy has, but there's just a lot of uncertainty there, even in the things that I think are billed as the people that talk about him as kind of like the can't miss low risk prospect. Like I see what the skill set is that they're talking about. I just don't think I believe in it based on the tape as much as some others do. So we both come in more in the third round. He'll probably end up going higher than how we have him graded. But I would not be surprised if, and I will say now, I have not watched Dart, I've not watched Shuck, any of those other guys, but I would not be surprised if there's one or two other guys that I end up preferring over Sanders outside of Ward in this cycle. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up there. John, thanks for coming on. We'll hopefully be able to knock some of these out now as we're getting closer to draft season, but excited to continue to do these, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for letting me talk about Shedeur again also.
All right, that'll do it for this episode. Stay tuned. Probably have some more stuff coming soon. I think Jackson Dart will probably be the next guy that we talk about. So thanks for listening.